I'm talking to you from the summit. Yes, the very top of a mountain called Lebuche. At 6,119 meters. It's a big mountain and I am knackered. Oh. But why would I climb a mountain that no one's ever heard of? Quite simply, because behind me you get the best views of Mount Everest. Best views, better than anywhere else on the planet. Over there, Mount Everest. Woo! So there I was on top of a 20,000 foot mountain a couple of years ago. The funny thing is, I'm not a mountaineer. I'm a guy that wanted to climb a mountain. Before I set off on that expedition, I didn't have even the minimum mountaineering experience to even be allowed on the trip. And I was about 2 stone overweight. But it's amazing what happens when you set your mind to something. Because within 3 months, I've been and got all the training I needed up in Scotland, in winter mountaineering skills, that means rock climbing with ropes, ice axe, crampons, in blooming cold weather. So I'd got that. And I'd set myself a fitness regime, which I hoped was going to be good enough. That consisted of walking into work every day and going up and down the multi-story car park a few times each day. Anyway, 3 months later, I was getting off the plane in Kathmandu. Now, it took 10 days hiking just to get to the mountain. It took 10 days just to get there, and 2 days to climb the mountain. It took 2 days to climb the mountain. And I want to tell you about just one moment of that climb, because I was about 20,000 feet high. The air was thin. I could hardly breathe. I took a rest. And I looked out across the valley, and I saw that there was nothing between me and Mount Everest. You saw up there, sort of. There was nothing between me and Mount Everest. And as I looked across, it dawned on me that I was no longer looking up. I was actually looking across. Because when you're walking towards Mount Everest, you can see it for days way up in the distance. But as you get closer, it gets higher and higher. And when you get closer, you can hardly even see it because it's right up there. But here I am on the other side of the valley, just looking across. And as I stood there, I watched the sunrise. I watched the sunrise up behind Mount Everest. Now that moment will stay with me forever. Funny thing is, I've always been interested in the world, what's going on around the world. And I think it stems from programs like The World About Us. Did anyone see that as a child all those years ago? That World About Us would show us animals from around the world, the jungles, the deserts, the mountains, from far-flung places. And what about the underwater sea world of Jacques Cousteau? Yes, getting lots of nods there. I dreamed of working with Jacques Cousteau on that boat they called the Calypso. As I dreamed of that. Is it okay if I share with you some of my, just little stories of a few of my adventures? Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. That was a little bit delayed. And so, the first time I crossed the Sahara Desert as a young man, we took the Tanner's Ruft route, which is an ancient route across the Sahara Desert to Timbuktu and then down into Africa. Further on that same trip, I once hitchhiked across the Kalahari Desert. I hitchhiked across the Kalahari Desert from Windhoek to the Okavango. At one point, I was 3 days waiting for the first vehicle to come through. And you might ask, why on earth would you want to hitchhike across the Kalahari Desert? You idiot. Were the sentiments of my father. But I knew where there were tracks, I knew where I was going, and I knew that I could get to the Okavango if I just had the time. Now, the Okavango is this huge water area in the center of the desert. It's a swampland come marshland. And most rivers flow into the sea. In fact, almost every river in the world flows into an ocean or into a sea. But this one flows in to the center of a desert. And sometimes, even now as an adult, I have to pinch myself and think, did that really happen? Because there I was at 23 years old, in the middle of Africa, in the middle of the Okavango, in a wooden dugout canoe, exploring to my heart's content. I think, how did that really happen? And there was some time, around about that time, I reckoned I hadn't slept in a bed for more than 4 months. Such was my desire to see the world. I remember climbing a volcano, a 10,000-foot volcano, just to look inside at that molten lava. And I went in search of those mountain gorillas that David Attenborough showed us. Did anyone see those? I went in search, but I didn't have David Attenborough with me, and I didn't have a film crew. In fact, I went on my own, and I went on the bus. And I went on the bus as far as the bus would go, and then I walked to the mountains till I found a village with a guide called Zachariah, who took me for 5 days into these mountains in search of these gorillas. And for 4 days, we couldn't see them. For 4 days, we climbed up and down some of the steepest terrain I've ever been in. And for 4 days, we hacked through some of the thickest jungle I've ever seen. But for 4 days, we never saw them. But on the 5th day, hooray, we found gorilla poo. Yes, we found gorilla shit. And we saw where they slept last night. And that's as close as I came to seeing the gorillas. But it didn't matter, because I'd found myself in one of the most beautiful and spectacular places in the world. And I was having the time of my life. From there, I followed the River Nile from start to finish. It was a journey of 3 months, and that was a journey. If you know that area, you know that is a journey. And of course, in Egypt, I was able to explore the Valley of the Kings, the Karnak Temple, and the pyramids at Giza. I didn't just see the pyramids at Giza, I was able to go inside them and sit in that chamber inside the Great Pyramid at Giza. And for those of you who are wondering, what on earth is he talking about? Where is this going? Just bear with me one moment, because I never did get to work with Jacques Cousteau on his boat, the Calypso, but I did go on a beautiful yacht in some beautiful tropical waters. It was a sailing boat, and the sail was full of wind. We were going good speed, and we had dolphins all around us. We had dolphins all around. They were at the front, the side, and at the back. And it was just glorious. And it was at that point I thought I would take this rope that we had on the boat, about a 25-foot rope on the boat, and making sure that one end was fastened to the boat, the other end tied around my arm, held onto it tight like that, and jumped off the back of the boat. With a big splash, I landed in the water. So now I'm being dragged behind the boat at great speed like this, but with the dolphins all around me. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful moment. I say moment because after about 30 seconds, they all swam away. They all swam away. But those 30 seconds have lasted a lifetime. Now, there is a point what I'm going to talk about, because I want to share something with you. I want to share something that is hugely embarrassing. I want to share something that I had kept a secret for most of my life from most of the world. Because by the age of 25, I'd already set up my first business growing orchids on a tropical island. I'd already visited more than 40 countries. By the age of 30, it was more like 60 countries. But by the age of 30, I still couldn't read or write. I couldn't write a letter. I couldn't even write a postcard. And I'd like to ask all of you here that managed to learn to read and write, like most people as a child, how would your life be different? I'd like you to contemplate, how would your life be different if you didn't learn to read and write as a child? How would your life be different if a book was as interesting as a brick? How would your life be different if you'd never passed a single exam in your life? Except for art. How would your life be different if you couldn't fill out a bank form to open a bank account, let alone a job application? And there will be people in this room who have difficulty reading and writing. Statistically, there will be. And they will probably be keeping this a secret from most of the world because it's embarrassing. You feel ashamed. My message to you is do not give up. Keep at it. Just because you're dyslexic doesn't mean you should stop trying. It took me 35 to 40 years to learn to read and write. And I'm not William Shakespeare now, but it took me 35 to 40 years. And my message to you is don't give up. It's worth it. I remember as an adult trying to read some novels, and it would take me something like 2 hours to read a page, something like 4 to 5 months to read a book. But of course, I didn't finish a book for ages because I'm a patient guy, but I'm not that patient. You know, I tried loads of books and I'd get about that far through before I managed to read a book in its entirety. And then I did a Robert Ludlum novel. Thank you, Robert, for creating such wonderful script that kept my attention, that kept me interested and intrigued to be able to finish. But I have to tell you that finishing that book, completing that book, was probably a bigger challenge than it was climbing that 6,000-meter mountain. And I was being interviewed recently, and the interviewer asked me, how has your dyslexia held you back? And all my life I've thought that my dyslexia had held me back, all my life. But as I contemplated it, and I thought about it before I answered, and I thought, well, I've got a beautiful wife. I've got a wonderful family, 2 businesses. I coach royalty. I coach politicians in the Houses of Parliament. I coach CEOs. I've come to think, I've had all those experiences, and I've come to realize that my dyslexia, far from holding me back, has actually set me free. Thank you.